One thing needs to be said before the list starts. Collapsing here means market position and long-term brand stability, not that the car parked in your driveway is suddenly bad. Several of these brands still build genuinely solid vehicles. What's collapsing is sales volume, dealer confidence, and in some cases the parent company's global financial footing, and all three of those things affect you directly as an owner, even if the car itself runs perfectly on day one. This is based on real 2026 VFA CDS sales data, not speculation, and the pattern across this country is brutal. Chinese brands like BYD, MG, GWM, and Chery are eating market share from established names faster than almost anyone predicted. Drop your state or region in the comments, because dealer density for some of these brands is starting to thin out noticeably depending on where in Australia you actually live. Let's start the countdown. Number 6, Volkswagen. Volkswagen's Australian sales are down close to 20% year to date through 2026, following an already rough 2025, and the trend line isn't turning around. Part of the problem is positioning. Volkswagen has priced itself in an awkward middle ground, more expensive than the surging Chinese brands offering comparable tech and space, while not carrying the outright prestige of German rivals like Mercedes-Benz, which has actually limited its own losses to under 4% this year. Volkswagen's local dealer network has also faced ongoing consolidation pressure as the brand's Australian arm works to right-size operations against shrinking volume. If you're shopping Volkswagen in 2026, the product itself, particularly things like the Tiguan and Golf, remains competent. But a brand losing this much share this consistently tends to see reduced dealer investment and slower parts turnaround over time. And that's worth factoring into a long-term ownership decision. Number 5, Suzuki. Suzuki's Australian sales have fallen anywhere from 20 to over 30%, depending on the month, through 2026, among the steepest declines of any mainstream brand in the country. Suzuki's core problem is a lineup mismatch with what Australians are actually buying right now. The brand remains built around small, efficient cars and compact SUVs at a moment when the market has fully shifted toward midsize and larger SUVs, exactly the segment where Chinese brands are undercutting everyone on price with more standard equipment. Suzuki hasn't had the capital or scale to respond with a competitive midsize offering, which leaves it fighting for a shrinking slice of a shrinking segment. If Suzuki's your daily driver, the reliability reputation genuinely remains strong. This is purely a market position problem, but a shrinking sales base outside major cities can mean fewer dealers and longer waits for less common parts down the track. Number 4, Mazda. This one's uncomfortable to say after we've praised Mazda repeatedly on this channel for reliability and low running costs. And the product itself hasn't gotten worse. But Mazda's Australian sales have dropped between 14 and 23%, depending on the reporting period through 2026, slipping out of its usual top 3 position and down to 5th place year to date behind Toyota, BYD, Ford, and Kia. The core issue is electrification timing. Mazda has been slower than Toyota, Kia, and the Chinese brands to bring genuinely competitive hybrid and EV options to Australian showrooms, and buyers who might have defaulted to a Mazda 3 or CX 5 years ago are now cross-shopping a Kia Sportage Hybrid or a BYD Celion at a similar price point with more standard tech. Mazda does have an electric Mazda 6e and CX-6e coming, which should help stem the bleeding, but until those actually land in numbers, the brand is losing ground it built over 2 decades in a matter of months. If you already own a Mazda, this doesn't change the case we made for earlier, it changes how much negotiating room you might find at the dealership right now. Number 3, Mitsubishi. Mitsubishi's Australian sales have fallen between 25 and nearly 40%, depending on the month, through 2026, a genuinely alarming trend for a brand that's traditionally sat comfortably in the country's top 10. The core problem mirrors what we've flagged in other markets: a thin, aging model lineup that hasn't kept pace with rivals refreshing every 2 to 3 years. The Triton Uda is actually holding up reasonably well against its Nissan Navara stablemate, but the rest of the range has struggled to compete against fresher Chinese and Korean offerings at similar price points. Mitsubishi's ongoing alliance ties with Nissan and Renault add another layer of uncertainty. When one alliance partner is in serious financial restructuring, as Nissan currently is, investment decisions across the whole group tend to get more conservative, which historically means slower model refreshes for the smaller partner. If you're shopping Mitsubishi purely on price, that's understandable, but go unaware that resale value on a brand losing this much share this fast tends to soften faster than a market average. Number 2, Subaru. Subaru's Australian sales are down between 22 and as much as 37%, depending on the month through 2026, among the steepest declines of any established brand in the country. Part of this is self-inflicted. The redesigned Outback has drawn genuinely mixed reviews locally, with reviewers specifically flagging a step backward in a key area compared to rivals like the Toyota Kluger and Mazda CX-60, undermining the model that's long been Subaru's bread and butter here. The Forester, despite still being relatively fresh, has also posted a concerning sales decline of its own this year. Subaru built its entire Australian identity around all-wheel drive capability, but that advantage has eroded as nearly every competitor now offers AWD as standard, and the arrival of the new Subaru Uncharted electric model hasn't yet been enough to offset losses across the rest of the lineup. A shrinking sales base in a country this geographically spread out can translate into fewer dealerships outside major metro areas, which matters enormously if servicing your Outback currently means driving into the nearest big town. Number 1, Nissan. This is the brand collapsing the hardest in Australia, with sales down anywhere from 33 to nearly 45%, depending on the reporting period through 2026, the steepest decline of any major automaker in the country and one of the worst in the world. And like the Canadian and Canadian-adjacent markets we've covered before, this isn't just a local story, it's global. Nissan has spent the last 2 years in serious financial restructuring, cutting tens of thousands of jobs worldwide, closing plants, and scrambling to stabilize after previous merger talks with Honda collapsed. In Australia specifically, that instability shows up as a shrinking, aging model range. The Qashqai down nearly 80%, the X-Trail down close to 50% at points this year, and legacy nameplates like the Pathfinder, Juke, and Leaf being quietly discontinued from the local lineup entirely as the company pivots toward a narrower hybrid-focused range built around the X-Trail, Navara, and Patrol. When a global automaker is in this kind of financial position, it shows up on the ground in very specific ways. Shrinking choice, delayed refreshes, and dealers less willing to negotiate because their own margins are getting squeezed from head office. If you're considering a Nissan in 2026, the vehicle itself might be perfectly fine, but you're buying into a brand whose long-term local commitment is genuinely in question, and that's a real risk to resale value and part support 5 or 10 years down the road. Here's the takeaway. A brand sales numbers collapsing doesn't automatically mean the car in front of you is bad. Several of these brands still build genuinely competent vehicles, and Toyota itself posted double-digit declines this year purely because of how fast BYD and the Chinese brands are growing, not because the RAV4 got worse. What it does mean is added risk around resale value, dealer density, and long-term model support. 3 things that matter just as much as fuel economy and servicing cost once you're 3 or 4 years into ownership. If this breakdown gave you something to think about before your next purchase, hit like so more Australian buyers see it before they walk onto a yard. Subscribe if you want more no-nonsense market breakdowns, because the Australian auto industry is shifting faster in 2026 than it has in decades, and we're going to keep tracking exactly who's winning and who's losing. And drop a comment with your state and whether you're currently driving one of these 6 brands, because real dealer and ownership experience from across this country tells us more than any VFA CTS chart ever will. By smart, not by trend.